Okay, well, good morning, everybody. My name is George Quinlan. I'm with onShore Security here in Chicago. Thank you for joining us on a unusual Thursday morning, to say the least, given the situation that we're in. I hope everybody is safe and healthy. Joining us today, we have Steve Behm from FlexPrint and Frank Gonzalez, and we're going to be discussing the Internet of Threats and the fact that devices can be backdoors into your network from a security perspective. One of the things that we often see in our professional services practice is that companies often overlook devices like printers and other devices, and they are actually security backdoors. They tend to run embedded operating systems like Linux and Windows these days, and companies in general don't do a very good job of securing these things. So without further intro, I'm going to hand the call over to Frank and Steve. Frank, please introduce yourself, and Frank will be leading us through today's presentation.
Hey, Steve, you want to go first?
Yeah, I'll say a few words. Hey, this is Steve Behm, I'm Vice President of Professional Services for the Flex Technology Group. And, we really want to appreciate onShore for their efforts here today. And, it's a unique time we're in, as George said. We're all sitting many times at our houses now. I mean, we're stopping travel, we're stopping in-person meetings. Needless to say, this has had a dramatic impact on our business. And we're really challenged now from working from home, but we're not in the office. And in today's world, who's minding it? Who's minding the office? We hear today the threats of people breaking into offices because nobody's there. Obviously, if you're a criminal, you want to break into things where nobody's around. So not only do we have to worry about the networks, we also have to worry about the devices. And cybersecurity now is a very important topic of today. And so there's two companies on the phone today. We have onShore. onShore is really a cybersecurity company kind of managing the overall cybersecurity rules and everything that might take place throughout a business and a network. And Flex Technology Group, I'll talk a little bit about. I mean, we're a group of 16 different companies. We have a nationwide presence, and we focus really on the printers and copiers and devices like that, because these devices, as George said, are a backdoor to getting into a network. And today, with nobody maybe being at the office, and even though the IT staffs are under high pressure to put in work from home environments and things like that, it really gives an opportunity now for cyber criminals to break into a network. So what we'll talk about today is really how we can prevent some of those things. And so what I want to do right now is introduce Frank Gonzalez. Frank Gonzalez joined FTG really in 2008. So he's been with us almost 12 years now. And he's really been a transformation leader focusing on creating and implementing, complex technology-driven solutions based around the business that we're in. And it's been in all kinds of businesses, whether it's manufacturing, banking, high-tech enterprises. He's done print solutions for companies like Sony and Fidelity and Swift Transportation, as well as other Fortune 5,000 and 500 organizations across the nation. So with that, I'll go ahead and invite Frank. Frank, if you want to get on and start the presentation. And once again, I want to thank everybody for joining. If there are any questions at all, you can type those into the chat box. We'll be monitoring that, and we may pause Frank from time to time to ask those questions. But also feel free to try to unmute and ask a question directly. And again, at the end, we'll go ahead and give everybody time to ask questions as well. So without further ado, Frank, if you want to go ahead and start.
Awesome. Thanks, Steve. Thanks again, everybody. Thank you, everybody. And in light of today's events, right, pandemic, if you or anyone that's been exposed to the virus, right, you have our sympathy and care. So obviously, as you understand, today's topic is Internet of Threats, right? So there's a device that's just sitting in the corner that people just think, oh, it's just printing, it's just a printer. But in today's presentation, you'll see a little bit more and understand that it's not just a printer, it's doing a lot more and than what it should be doing, right? So start off here. So vulnerability intelligence team, right? So a team that monitors multiple sources on a day-to-day, right? Applications, special logs, mail servers, anything that requires monitoring. right? And then you got the security response team, right? They're the ones that deal with published vulnerabilities. So I did a little chart here, vulnerabilities that, were reported by year. So if you look at the bottom of the, the orange block, 2019, there were 18,940 reported, and kind of broke down the first 4 months to kind of show you what's happening today, January, February, March of last year compared to 2020, right? As you can see from each month, it's growing. So again, during this pandemic, we think, okay, nothing's happening, but it's not the case, right? It's constantly growing. Hackers are looking for a way to get into environments and cause some type of a shutdown, right? So with that being said, we understand that, security response team, they're very busy guys already, right? So, and with this whole pandemic now, companies are forced to lay off, IT staff, right? Including security positions, which means there's more vulnerabilities, that need to be triaged, right? So with a group like onShore that we're working with as well, as we teamed up with them, they're able to help with that pandemic during the time where if you had to lay off an employee, not furloughed, but actually laid off due to the whole pandemic. As you can see here, the cybersecurity nutrition facts, right? How important these guys are, the passion, determination, the creativity, the critical thinking, right? There's a lot into that these guys put into to making sure an environment is safe. So when you lose or have to lay off people, there's a lot more, put into one person trying to handle all these type of things. Again, the applications, the logs, and then now to respond to the published vulnerabilities that come out. During the epidemic still, right, as you can see, I wanted to add these slides, kind of a little bit off course of what we do, right, talking about the printers, of course, and the security, but, they are still continuing different ways of hacking, right? So I'm not going to go over all these, but I wanted to just show you that, every week there's something new that they're working on to try and, hack, right, especially applications like Zoom and, Facebook and iPhone camera. Again, we just want you to be aware that, things are still happening today. Threats continued, again, talking about this epidemic, I think it's important, that we share this information to you guys, because again, we're focused on making sure your network, but we know companies today are sending out emails to employees to be very careful with what they open. So as you can look at here in the screenshots, right, on the left side, there's more than 4,000 coronaviruses related website domains were registered globally, right? Over 4,000. Scammers are using that as a virus outbreak. Checkpoint software found that 3% were found malicious, 5% of those were found suspicious. So the malicious rate of the coronavirus domains were 50% more domains registered than in the same period. So again, they're using different ways, tactics to get into a network, right? Having the person click on an email, a phishing email, and cause that. The online coronavirus threat, malicious spam emails, right? This is coming from Trend Micro, over 199,000. That's coming from them, right? Hackers using fake corona antivirus. Again, a different way to try and lure somebody in. And of course, apps. Apps today, fake Android coronavirus tracker app, right? It's actually ransomware, right, being installed. So again, we just want to share this with all of y'all who's on this meeting, and if you are in the position where you're sending emails out to your employees, right, these are things that should not be overlooked today. Next slide, as you can see, is actually a phishing attempt, right? So it's a representation of a phishing attack without looking properly, right? So if you just click on the email, think you're okay, and it opens right up. So again, baby here thinking it's gonna get pizza, and actually it wasn't. It was actually baby food, and like. So the next slide is what I'm gonna show you is a video is how to hack a printer, right? So this group is actually hacking to printer and utilizing technology without needing to be on site.
Ong wanted to show us some hacks they'd done using a piece of malware he affectionately calls Funtena, which exploits radio frequencies, RF signals, to turn office equipment into bugging devices.
So Funtena is basically using software and all of the common pieces of hardware that you find in basically every embedded device to force that hardware to transmit an RF signal to exfiltrate data, right?
So that's a radio frequency?
Over RF, yes, right? So if we have software that push electrons through this wire in a predictable way, then, you know, Maxwell's equations say we can, right, induce a magnetic and electric field, and then we're going to get an RF signal that we can receive with, you know, all sorts of standard, you know, radio receivers, basically using only software. So what we did is basically reconfigure the software controlled input pin to go to output, so we can actually convince the phone that it's really off the hook when it's not off the hook.
So you basically placed a bug into a meeting room or wherever the phone is?
Sure, through software, right? So nobody had to sneak into this room, nobody had to tamper with the phone. It was all just software through the network. And in this case, it was software delivered to this phone through a printer. And we get the exploit to the printer through a resume. So we send you a resume. The resume rewrites the firmware on the printer to do whatever we want. And what we want to do is find all the phones. So that once we find the phones, the printer goes out and exploits all the vulnerable phones, and now we have eyes and ears in every room.
Right, let's see what it can do.
Okay, so, well, it's been doing it all this time, right? So we're gonna look over there, right? Our entire conversation was, you know, exfiltrated to my laptop, and I guess I can turn the volume on and we can hear what it sounds like. Okay, so we're gonna talk, right? And there's a slight delay, maybe a little bit of an echo, right? But the audio quality is actually pretty good. And on later versions of this attack, we were able to do live speech to text. So instead of, you know, sending out all of the audio data, we just had the phone tweet everything that was being said.
So you're tweeting out everyone's secrets?
Yep, pretty much.
Ong then showed us how the Funtena software could make a printer spill secrets by leaking information through RF signals. He could pick these up using an antenna. In this case, a cheap AM radio he named after a famous actor.
I'm going to show you a really cheap AM radio, right? This guy's called Tom Cruise, and we're going to see what Tom Cruise will say about Funtena.
Let's do it.
All right, we're going to turn on and see if we can.
The exploit caused the printer's components to vibrate and transmit the data as if it was Morse code. With a powerful enough antenna, a hacker could intercept the signals from a distance without ever going near the printer.
To an AM radio, that's what it sounds like, a tiny little beacon.
So that's the sound of the data that you're extricating?
Mm-hmm. Yep, exactly. There you go.
How can you turn that into something usable?
So we'll show you. And this is where this computer does this thing. So what you're looking at here is the RF version of Funtena, right? We have the software-defined radio, we have the antenna, we have the printer transmitting over here, right? And what's going on is the antenna is piping into this tiny little box, which is being processed on the laptop, and you're seeing the same beep, 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 beep you're hearing on the AM radio. And what our software is doing is basically taking these tiny little dots, right, turning it into binary, and then decoding it over here. So the sky above the port was the color of
television. So it's the first sentence of Neuromancer.
Yes, the first sentence of Neuromancer. Right, so basically we can send out whatever data we want from pretty much all sorts of, you know, embedded devices that you have all over the place. And ta-da!
So say someone was printing off some like sensitive documents. If there was Funtena loaded on that printer, then you could grab that sensitive information using an antenna and translate it back into something that you can understand.
Yeah, and you know, even more, if somebody was saying something sensitive on the phone can send that information to the printer, and the printer can Funtena it out, right? Or you grab some information on the printer, you can send it to the phone, and the phone can Funtena it out, right? It's you know, there's nothing special about this printer that's allowing me to do the Funtena transmission, right? Every embedded device effectively has the same hardware that, in theory, can allow me to transmit information out in this way.
So we're not just talking kind of office secrets. This could be like military secrets.
Right. You know,
power station.
Whatever reason you want to build a steel enforced concrete bunker, right? Yeah, yeah.
Ong's Funtena hack is clearly pretty advanced, and what makes it particularly impressive is how it can transmit data using radio frequencies. This means it could send stolen information through walls without a hacker ever having to enter the building. It's quite scary to think about all the systems that could fall into the wrong hands. You think about securing your laptop, your phone, you don't necessarily think about all the other devices that hackers could use to break into a network.
Awesome. So as you can see, you know, printers today have, you know, the tools or the hardware to be able to, you know, broadcast and do whatever you like to do, right? Whatever the hacker's trying to do with a printer. We all have printed resumes. We've all clicked on that, right? So any type of attachment, you know, can have some type of code. And, you know, with printers today, they are just like servers, right? They have all the capabilities. So existing challenges, you know, that we see is that, you know, multiple brands, you know, there's no comprehensive offerings for cybersecurity, right? No comprehensive tools, and people are limited employees in cybersecurity, right? Not to manage in the whole print environment. And no easy way to secure and monitor devices. Again, IT is very busy, focused on other projects as well. So they kind of we think, okay, it's just a printer, but you know, there's more to it. Difficult to remediate, right, when an issue is found with no automation. So especially when you're in an enterprise level, you're in the thousands, 500 to 1,000, you know, it's harder to manage that, you know, because it's one by one. Implications of the challenges: potential entry to the network. Again, as you can see with this, you know, potential data loss and significant costs, right? Cost definitely to stop a company from having continuing revenue. So picture here, this IT guy here sitting there, right? They get every type of issue in front of them, right? My phone's not working. Something's wrong with the server. Can I get this report? Email doesn't work. My phone doesn't work. You know, they have a lot going on in their minds already as they're trying to take care of an environment, make sure an environment's running. So there's a lot in play for that. Life cycle of a data breach, right? So an average time to identify and contain 279 days. 314 days of a life cycle malicious attack to breach to containment. An average is 1.2 million, right? At a 200-day cost. Again, we have to remember, you know, hackers today, what they do with malware, they're getting smarter and smarter. So they'll send the malware out. You know, if somebody will click a link, open it, it'll get installed. It'll sit there dormant and wait for maybe 2 weeks, 3 weeks, right? So what it's doing, it's waiting for a backup, right? It's waiting for it to be backed up. So once it releases, it's opened and runs, now IT and security team is, you know, are after trying to figure out where it came from. So once they find where it is, they say, okay, cool, we shut servers down, whatever needs to be done, but say, well, we have a backup, so we can start from this backup. Well, it's been backed up already. So again, it's very costly, and these guys are getting smarter and smarter on how to breach a network and, you know, stop a company from their revenue. Some recent stories, and I won't go over all these, but I think one of them that really stands out here is the middle one, to the middle. Hackers once stole a casino's high roller database, right? Again, the IT is focused on everything else. There's a lot, especially dealing with money at a casino, right? So they said, okay, we're going to put a fish tank, we'll put a thermometer, wireless. Well, the hackers used the thermometer to get into the network and steal the database from there. Again, a forgotten device is just sitting in a corner, not thinking about it, right? So again, printers the same way. Sitting in a corner, it's just printing, but they have full server capability, protocol services, you know, type of tools on them. So the 4 layers that we think are very important to locked down is the vulnerability management, configuration hardening, compliance, security, and management, and secure print release, right? Those are the 4 layers that would help and lock down a printer more to keep your environment safer. Right. So the first one, we think is important is vulnerability management, right? Manage and maintain the printer's updates and enhancements, right? So today we update, you update your iPhones, we update our Windows, our Androids, our Macs. We get those updated, we get enhancements. If you look at the READMEs, the first thing they do is the security, show you what they fixed. Example, in an iPhone or an Android, they don't want you, the consumer, to try and hack into the example of Verizon network or T-Mobile network, right? They're trying to prevent things like that from happening, as well as other things. So printers today are the exact same way, right? They are printers, they're servers, they have the, Telnet, FTP, they have all the protocols and services just like a server, where if you don't update them and fix the holes, right, you're left open to vulnerability. So again, we want to treat printers the exact same way we would treat any other type of software. Again, if in this vulnerability management as well, a report to show you what type of holes are open on this. So again, this is the type of stuff that could be provided.
Hey, Frank, we got a quick question.
Sure.
So someone asked, as people are patching Windows and things like that, does this ever get updated with that, or is this purely separate and gets missed?
It's purely separate. Yep, it's a mist, right? So it's one thing that we look at when we go into an environment and we notice when we run our tools and we see the printers, right? We show them that they've been missed, right? And I have a report that I'll show next that kind of show what it looks like, Steve. So here's one of the analysis reports that we will show you, in this example here on the left side, 29% of their HPs had a security known risk, right? So in the center, you see the report, out of date, there's 87 devices. The yellow, end of support, meaning there's no more published scheduled firmware. So again, in this example, 78 printers were there. And in the pink reddish box, those are the bulletins, right? This is what we would show to help, with working with like onShore as well, part of their reporting pieces, where what's end of support, it's just its last firmware available, as well as what's upgradable, what can be fixed, right? So the vulnerability, the holes to close those. So this is the one report. A little detail, more detail that report we're just showing you, right? So we'll break it down and show you, the model of the printer, the firmware revision, when it was resolved, and its latest, right? I'll have a bulletin to show you the exact vulnerability that was found, right? Below the chart, if you look at it, so just the detail of those printers, you can kind of show you, for example, the first printer on the first chart here. This printer was 12 revisions behind. Again, to answer the question, Steve, correct, it's missed, right? They update other stuff, but again, printers are forgotten, for example. So in this case, this one's 12. This other one is 18 revisions behind, and this one's 11, right? And this one is at Herbert's desk. This one's in a printer room, right? 18 revisions behind with vulnerabilities, and it's just sitting in a printer room by itself. And this printer here, right? Again, 11 revisions behind, and it's in the main office, right? This one's one of the printers that's not being published anymore with firmware. So again, it's left as a vulnerability, a hole in your environment where somebody could walk up, plug a device in, and start some type of malicious attack. Just a little more detailed of that report. As you can see, the security bulletin, for example, those one that was in the printer room, right? The bulletin says you're able to run Crosssite scripting, right? We've got the CVE number as well, where, so it's definitely in the national database. and the details of what it's going to attack, right? The network, right? So if something were to run, they were to run some cross scripting, you know, they can attack the network.
Yeah, I just want to add real quick, you guys, that this is really kind of this basic, this is George with onShore. It's kind of part of your basic hygiene processes for security, which really break down to, you know, two things, and it's more of a process thing than a technology implementation issue. It's scanning and patching, and they're both nonstop recurring processes that companies need to implement and do well. We typically don't see companies do both very well, either on the vulnerability management side, where you're running continuous vulnerability scans to find the problems, and then also on the patching side to fix all the problems. We typically find holes in most organizations. We're often brought in to run vulnerability scans of the entire system, and we usually find missing things, and one of those missing things are the printers. Companies tend to put Windows on patch, you know, autopilot, and assume that everything's getting addressed, and they miss the fact that there is no easy automated way to auto patch printers. And so we'll see a lot of things like Frank is showing, where there's a lot of holes in the network. So this is really important to address.
Awesome. Yep. Correct, George. Absolutely right on this. So, yeah, an addition, another layer is actually the configuration management, right? So the printer, when somebody walks up, as like Steve mentioned this morning or earlier, you know, there's not people in the offices today, or they're not, or they're, you know, there's maybe 5 to 10% of staff there working there. Social distancing is, of course, but, you know, the devices, you can plug in USB. So example here, for this type of management, right? You want to make sure that you lock the screen down, right, to only using the appropriate functions, right? Setting up the folder paths, right? The scan to email, right? Using cybersecurity settings and enabling and disabling certain ports that can't be accessed from the printer. So again, with the printer sitting by itself, you know, you can plug in a USB and start, you know, scanning stuff to yourself. Again, this type of configuration management, where if you were to use like a locked print or locked pin to log into the device would help. So again, this is configuration management. Again, a layer that we think is important that you guys, the consumer, should be doing that as well, making sure that only functions can be used there. So back to the printer compliance security, right? The third layer, right? This is actually the more in-depth layer, right? So we definitely want to disable ports that aren't being used, right? Today, printers have Wi-Fi built in, so Wi-Fi direct. So plug your laptop, turn on your laptop, connect to the printer, and now you're on the network, right? Because the printer's on the network, right? We want to make sure that the devices are locked down, right? Have some type of code, right? We want to make sure that you guys are doing like disabling ports that are not needed, like FTP is not needed. Telnet doesn't need to be enabled on these type of printers, right? Disabling certain ports that aren't needed, right? So somebody can't just walk up and connect to the device and say, okay, I'm going to scan this to myself. I see this sitting on a printer, right? I'm sure you all walk through your offices and seen documents sitting right on the finisher, right on the top, where people printed and never picked up, right? So again, that's an easy way to be breached, right? By taking those documents, as well as plugging in a USB and then scanning them themselves. So again, this printer and compliance and security is a very important layer that I think that should be done in every environment.
Yeah, I would add something too there, Frank. A lot of people don't realize that a lot of the big devices today have hard drives in them. Most have for a while.
Yes.
And they are storing a copy of literally every document that's been printed, copied, or scanned through that device. And if you don't have that printer locked down, I may not be able to get into your corporate file server because your Windows systems administrators have done a good job of hardening up your file shares, but the printer is wide open and I can get in there and pretty easily copy or exfiltrate literally a copy of every document that's ever gone through that device. And there's a pretty high likelihood that if I were a bad guy, I'd get my hands on some fairly sensitive information I shouldn't have at that point.
Yep, absolutely, George. You're absolutely right. You know, it's like in this printer compliance security as well. You know, we definitely recommend turning on the overwrite protection on printers. Again, you know, the IT doesn't really think about that. Again, think it's just the printer, but absolutely, you're correct. You know, anything that's scanned through it is running through that hard drive. So again, with this type of layer that we would recommend for everybody is absolutely turning on overwrite protection as well. And the final layer that we recommend is, you know, print secure release. Like mentioned, you know, when you're walking in an environment, there's print jobs sitting at a department printer or a copier, right, sitting there on top. You know, I think it's very important that if there is, you know, if you have vendors walking through or print jobs that only should be seen for a C-level exec, right, they shouldn't just be able to just print it and release out. Right, department printers should have some type of security layer where they walk up to the device. It should be locked down, right? The device should be locked down where nobody can just actually access the printer to be used, one, and two, release print jobs. So we recommend using the tools. Again, every manufacturer today offers free software built into the driver, right? It's already free, it's there. You can turn that feature on, turn the lock print on. Now users, when they hit print, you know, they'll have to walk the device and release their job, as well as it's going to save costs for sure too in paper waste. Because again, walking through environments that we've seen, it's like there's paper stacks all over that just jobs aren't picked up. So again, this cuts costs as well as security, right? A very important piece as well on it. So just kind of coming back, finishing off the presentation, you know, the concerns that we talked about, right? Network security, right? Potential entry to the network through unsecure devices. You know, the current challenges, right? No easy way to secure, monitor, network protocol settings. Difficult to remediate, you know, any found issues again. And potential data loss and significant cost of the network breach. Again, doing those types of layers on each printer, those 4 layers, will help address all these concerns. So we're getting to the very end already. Again, just kind of touching back the 4 different layers that we recommend should be done, right? Again, back to the firmware management, which is the vulnerability management, manage and maintain the printer critical updates, the configuration management, again, the way the device is behaving up front for the end users, right? Cyber hardening certain settings, enable certain alerts, right? Typical tray configurations, you know, and compliance, security port management. Again, just speaking of, like George mentioned, the hard drive, right? We want to make sure we turn on overwrite. We want to make sure we turn off ports and protocols that aren't being used and aren't needed to be turned on a printer, so that nobody tries to run some type of application. Because again, printers, new printers especially now, are coming with that touch screen, have actually browser access, so you can access the internet. So again, printers have that capability. And the final layer, again, is the secure print release, just making sure the print jobs and or somebody, if it's a printer that's sitting in a department, or you have users or personnel that aren't from the workforce there, don't have access to those print jobs. The final slide, you know, risk and cost to unprotected print environments, right? 94% of financial firms say that copier and printer security is important, very important. You know, 61% connected themes by 2020. 43% of companies ignore printers in their endpoint practice policies. I mean, it's a forgotten thing. We just think it's a printer itself. And 11.7 million an average analyzed cost of cybercrime. So thank you very much, everybody, for viewing this presentation with us. Are there any questions?
Hey, Frank, we did get one question. Do you guys, does FTG do any penetration testing through these devices or that?
Yeah, we actually partner with onShore on that. onShore, George, I think you could probably answer that one, but absolutely.
Yeah, typically as part of vulnerability management, we will, go in and assess an entire network, all the devices, networks, servers, printers, workstations, and then in a sort of a deeper level engagement when companies are looking to actually pen test their network, yes, we will break into devices, including printers, and really anything. Typically in a pen test engagement, the pen testers themselves, the ethical hackers, are looking for what we call low-hanging fruit, the easy stuff to break into. Unfortunately, in the real world, one of the easiest things to break into is often a printer. Um, it's things like, they're being unpatched, like Frank noted, or people just leave things set up as default, administrator with the password of password, and boom, I'm in and I have a foothold in the network, and then we can do things like pivot and move laterally through the network. So really, it's just the things that, this slide here, 43% of companies ignore these. And that's definitely been our experience and what we see out in the real world. So definitely something between both Flex and onshore, something we can help you address to, lock down your environment.
Then we got another question. This all looks great, but how do we get started? And what's the next steps here? We wanted to try some of this.
Frank, do you want to take a stab at that? You want me to try?
Yeah, definitely. I mean, we definitely recommend reaching out to us, the Flex Technology Group, and I'll have my contacts available, and myself and Steve, and we can do a report for you, kind of show you your environment, what it looks like today when it comes to the printing side of things, and then if you're looking for an in-depth layer for more abroad against your whole network, right? We would have onshore as well working with us together, so we can kind of provide a report and show you what your environment looks like today.
All right, we've got another question, and it's basically a two-part question. The first one is, how often do you see advanced hacking techniques being used in the real world? Second part is, as in something that would require enough knowledge to get by the basics mentioned here.
I think I'll take that one. I think it's sort of a three-part answer. We see sort of three levels of bad guys out there. The first is what we call sort of script kiddies, which are people that are just using downloadable, easily malware that sort of anybody could use. The second level is cyber criminals, organized crime. They're often after, stealing people's money. And the third would be nation state hackers, which are, the people that we really worry about. They're really the advanced hackers. We see, we see it fairly often. I guess it depends on what you define as an advanced hacking technique. Unfortunately, a lot of state level hacking tools have been released in the wild, with things like, Edward Snowden, releasing CIA and NSA hacking tools into the world. So how often do we see it? Cyber criminals, I see companies getting hit with ransomware or business email compromise, literally at least monthly, oftentimes weekly. How often are they using actual hacking to do this stuff? Probably 25% of the time. 75% of the time, the attack vector is email. We're seeing email is by far and away the largest attack vector. The second most common attack vector would be URL browsing, getting people to click on and go to some sort of infected website. And the third attack vector would be actual hacking someone. Why? Because a hacker is going to go to sort of the least common denominator and hit somebody using the easiest way they can get in, and that's usually just tricking people to click on something. Hacking is harder than getting people to click on some sort of phishing type of email. And so it just depends on their motive. Do we see nation states going after people? Not as often as we do criminals, of course, but it depends on what type of a target you are, as well. So we see it often enough to sort of answer your question. I mean, I see it in my professional practice weekly, monthly. We'll get a call from a customer saying, I think I've either have a data breach going on or security incident, or they have ransomware and their entire network has been encrypted, and should they pay the bad guys or not? That's what we're seeing a lot of these days. How they do those things, different attack vectors. Usually when they're hacking somebody, it's somebody made a basic mistake. They didn't patch something. They left some port open on the internet. They compromised them using surprisingly easy things like, a weak username or a password. And so how advanced is it? Sometimes it's not as advanced as you might think. It's usually people missing the basics. The bad guys and the hackers aren't as advanced as people really think they are. Otherwise, we'd all be in major trouble.
All right, very good. Any other questions? So we'll give everybody a minute or two to, if you want to ask another question, please feel free to type into the box. If not, certainly we want to thank our host, onShore, and their ability to really manage the security across the whole business continuity plan and things like that. And we also want to thank Frank Gonzalez for providing the presentation today. He did a great job. So I'll wait for another few seconds. If nobody types any other questions, then we will go ahead and say thank you to everybody. I want to thank everybody for joining today, taking time out of your day in this weird thing we're in. And we certainly appreciate it. And, from my perspective, I hope we all get back to work right away and get this thing moving again. So once again, thanks everybody for joining. Thanks, George. Thanks, Frank.
Thank you, Steve and Frank. And thanks everybody for joining us on this lovely Thursday morning.
All right.
Absolutely.
So we will adjourn the meeting, and everybody have a great day, and look forward to talking to you.
Stay safe.
Thanks.
Thanks, folks.
Thanks, everybody. Bye-bye.